also at both ends where you can hit it. No matter what, you can hit the emergency stop when this press is running wide open. It does not hurt it. It is designed to be hit. So make sure that all of your operators know where the emergency stops are on the press that you're operating. That's the first thing we teach at the school, is where these emergency stops are. We need to center all of this press out, and we start that by centering these eyes out in these circles. Each eye is on each side of the press. It's very easy not to look at this. Make sure that eyelet is in the center of that circle before you even start. Also on the same for this side. What that does is that gives you your reference from across the press being straight. If this eyelet here is out of whack and this eyelet here is out of whack that way, I know my bar's going crooked. So there's no way I'm going to get a perfect impression. I need to start out by centering them eyelets completely. Now, on your press, I'm sure there's other center mechanisms. Make sure you start your press out centered across first. Second thing we do here, this is a manual press, not automatic registration. We have probably about a 1/4 inch lineal register forward advancement and a 1/4 inch retard registration. This is all done manually by these knobs. Centering the press out is real simple. First thing I need to do, and that is get that nipple flush with the press. When that's flush with the press, then I've got as much advanced registration as I have retard. That's centered out. I go through my whole press, and I'll make sure every color is centered out before I start. Here again, by habit, I do this. I don't have to make it a conscious effort because I do it so often. But it's important that you do it. And no matter what press you run, get it centered out. Now, if you run 360-degree registration, you have a little bit different convenience, but too many times I see operators throw the cylinders in, don't even try to manually register them, and just sit there and hold the button until everything falls in. They start chasing the registration, and the next thing you know, you use 5,000 feet of stock to set up a job that should take 200 feet. That's my only complaint about the automatic register presses, is the pressmen tend to get a little bit lazier, and it costs a little bit more to run them because of that. If you're running an automatic registration press, stay on top of it. Don't just assume everything is right and that you're going to pull it in. Try to be efficient as possible. A manual press kind of forces that issue, and that is why we train here on that. The print rod's designed so that, as you can see right here, you have a notch on the operator side of the press. The first thing you have to clear when pushing this print rod through is this pin. When I'm lining this up like so, I have to first get that pin to that notch. Now, when that pin's in that notch, I can push it over. It has to push firm over and twist in place. When it twists in place, this will pop up. What happens when that pops up is this mechanism right here. When I push it down, it allows me to go through. It will only pop up when it's lined up perfectly with that slot. If it's not lined up with the slot, it is not going to pop up. So I see pressmen all the time doing this right here, and they'll be twisting it, trying to get it to pop up. Well, it can't pop up. Once it's in line there, then it can pop up. What that's designed to do, if you see that notch cut out, that grabs the bearing in your cylinder and pulls it from side to side adjustment. So when this pops up, it has to pop up inside your cylinder and grab it. And it works just like this. I push it over, line it up, and then when I turn the handle, as you'll see here in a second, it moves my print back and forth side to side. What we want to demonstrate today is a proper way of pulling a roll off a pallet. There are many units out there that'll do this for you, and I highly recommend it, but of course there's going to be many times where you don't have it. This roll of material here is pretty heavy. I do not want to pull it off by myself. That's the number one safe thing I'm going to do. In most cases, when I'm going to run a lot of stock, I'd have somebody help me offload this whole pallet all at one time so I don't have to worry about it. A key thing here is I have a back belt on. I wear one all the time. Adam Sanchez has a back belt on, wears one all the time. This will prevent you from hurting your back. what we're going to do is we're going to slide this roll off. Instead of manhandling it, we're going to take it from the side, and we're just going to let it kind of slide down the side of the pallet using these rolls without damaging anything as a buffer. So we're just going to kind of slide it, just kind of let it come on down, just like that. That way we're not hurting ourselves at all. You should do that every time. Get somebody to help you. It'll make a lot better sense.
I'm Jeff Chosin, and I'm with ConverSource. I'm from St. Louis. This is my partner, David Cloud. We own a company called ConverSource, and we are distributors of consumable supplies and accessory equipment for the label and tag press room. Art Fields asked us to come on out and talk with you guys about mounting tapes, and we are a major distributor of mounting tapes. We carry 3M and Harley and Tessa, and we'd like to just kind of talk about it with you. If you have any questions, just holler out and we'll address it as we go. 3M's kind enough to have a real nice piece of literature which does a very good job of explaining the differences in the various types of mounting tapes that are used in the label and tag industry. But basically there's two primary groups of mounting tapes. You will find hard vinyl tapes and foam tapes. Hard vinyl tapes are just what they say they are. They're hard and they do not compress when you set up the impression on your press. A foam tape is a compressible tape, and it does have some resiliency. When you set up a print station and you dial everything in to the point where it's just kissing the paper, you got to go a little bit further typically, because you have to wait until the lowest spot prints to take up for any inconsistencies in the plate or in the cylinder or any other part of the printing press. So that means that some areas you're going to have a little bit more impression than other areas. And what's going to happen on mounting tape is that if it's a hard tape, because the plate itself is soft, the plate will slightly deform. And on a foam tape, to the extreme soft of foam tape, if you slightly over impress because the tape is soft, that'll flatten out a little bit, and the images on the plate will not be distorted. But there isn't one tape to fit all applications. This chart really gives us a good example of what the various kinds of printing are and how they work. Just so you understand what we're going from, we've got a 10% highlight dot, a 50% mid-tone dot, a reverse, and a positive. And for all intents and purposes, the reverse also gives us an indication of how well a tape would print if it were printing also a solid. Rule of thumb, if you're printing solids, reverses, line copy, you go to the harder range of the tapes. And if you're printing something that has very fine detail, like process printing or vignettes, you would use the softer tape. And let's just kind of go look, and we'll talk about each one of them. First row on the left is a hard vinyl tape. As you can see, when you print a positive line copy, it does a real good job. Get good ink coverage in all the areas, the backgrounds are clean. As you can see in a reverse, good solid reverses, no pinholing. But when we get into the 50% midtones in the 10% highlights, they're a complete mess. You see that you've got this horrendous amount of slurring in the dot up in the highlight dots. The 50% a complete mess. So we can say right off that if you're printing screens or vignettes, you can't use a hard vinyl tape. And we're going to go completely to the other extreme and show you what a very soft tape would do. As you can see, the highlight dot is excellent. The midtone is excellent. But now we're seeing that the reverse is showing a lot of pinholes. So we don't have good density in there. That wouldn't work. And the same thing with the line copy down here, that there's all sorts of holes in the images. So that what's it showing you that there is not one tape for all applications. You got to properly pick the tape to print what you're doing at that particular time. What's happening in the industry, and I guess it's in all types of printing, is that people design jobs that really don't have a great of understanding of what the process is. And what happens is that they combine certain things so that they have some fine line copy and they have some solids, and you don't have enough print stations to do it on separate stations, so you've got to combine it. 3M has come up with the broadest line of mounting tapes that will really suit about any application. From here over, that's what they call their main foam mounting tapes. This is one of their older lines, which is for printing solid, and people are using it less and less. But let's look at these 4 tapes. On the soft, you have the 11 series, and those are the tapes that you would use for process, vignettes, very fine line copy, that type of work, screens and tints. And it would do an excellent job of holding the dot with the minimum amount of dot gain. When we get into these three, that's what 3M calls their combination tapes. And that's where you're running a combination of screens or very fine line copy or process and a little bit of solids. Right in the middle, they kind of split the difference, and that's on their 10 series tape. Does a pretty good job of holding your highlight dot, not too bad on your 50% screen, pretty good background in your reverse, and does a good job of your solids. But what happens is that might be fine for a lot of jobs, but in some situations, you're going to be taking that combination and kind of skewing it one way or the other. That, yeah, it's a combination job, but it's got more solids and not much screens, but you still want to maintain the screens being open. You could take one step to the left. If you can see right here, it does a real good job of printing your reverse and solids, good job of printing your line copy, but it starts to get a little bit weaker up into here. Did a pretty good job of your highlight dot and kind of in the middle as far as your midtones would go. Sometimes it's the exact opposite. And by the way, that's called their 10 series tape. You could have the opposite where it's still a combination type of job, but what you have is you're primarily running screens, vignettes, process, and you have a little bit of solid. So you want to kind of make that job look better on that fine stuff, and you're going to want to print okay on those solids and reverses, but you're not as concerned about it. You can go to 19 series. And you can see that its highlight dot is almost as good as the 11 series, way over on the right side. Again, it's doing a really good job on your midtone. It's not going to do as good of a job on your solid, and it's not going to do as good a job there, but it gives you the opportunity to split it. So there's a lot of different tapes for different applications, and what you do is you really set yourself up for the right tape for any kind of printing situation. Tapes, everybody wants the same thing on a mounting tape, and they want it to be repositionable so they can, after they put it down on the cylinder, they can peel the plate up and put it down to make sure that the plate is mounted perfectly. Then after you have it down, you want it to stick on there like grim death and never come off no matter what. And then at the end of the job, you want it to peel off and blow off like a piece of tissue paper and come off easily. And it's very difficult for these tape manufacturers to get all of these attributes in the same tape. The major product lines have done it in different ways. They use differential adhesives. They'll have one side stickier than the other. Remember, on a mounting, when you're mounting a plate, one side sticks against an aluminum cylinder, and the other side is sticking onto the back of a flexo plate that is typically polyesters. Different materials, different levels of adhesion. The right way for a tape to work is that you have reasonable repositionability. You can peel it up and put it back down without little bits of tape falling apart, so you're not ruining the tape. After you lay it down and you rub it down real smoothly, it holds down, and there's some tricks that you can do to help that. A lot of times when people are using smaller repeat cylinders, there's a problem of the edges of the plate lifting up. And there's some things that you can address that will really help that. One of them is don't get your greasy hands on the back of the plate. Just like trying to paint something that's greasy, is that if you have your oil on it from your hands, it's not going to stick well. So you always want to wipe the plates down in the back with isopropyl alcohol or soap and water. You don't want to use anything else. On very small repeat plates where they're very tight cylinders, sometimes you can do all the right things and it's not going to hold that plate down real tightly. And there's a lot of tricks that people can use. There's a product that we have called Primer 94 that'll make it stick. A lot of guys can take a solvent magic marker and run it on the leading and trailing edge of the plate, and that'll make it stick. Then after the job, now you've had it run for a long time, and now you want to get it off, and you want the tape to allow the plate to be peeled off, and it should stay primarily on the cylinder, and then you want to be able to pull the tape off the cylinder without leaving any little bits and pieces of tape on the cylinder. And that's what a good tape is. You guys have any questions? Thank you.
Hi, I'm David Cloud. Jeff introduced me before. We're partners in a business. And I've got some, he'd gone over some real technical aspects of the tapes. And and again, he was pointing to this little chart here. I talk in terms more in layman's terms.